It is my deep honor and also a deep source of shame this evening to introduce to you Patriarch Luis Sako. Honor because I would submit that there arguably is no more inspiring or courageous Christian community on the planet today than the church in Iraq, which has walked a via crucis these last 20 years that is almost unimaginable, and yet persists in unbelievable fidelity in maintaining the Christian witness not only in their beloved country, but in the entire Middle East. Shame, because I am profoundly conscious tonight that I am introducing the Patriarch as an American Christian. And it is my profound conviction that when the history of American Christianity in the late 20th and early 21st century is eventually written, the fact that in the main we stood idly by while the church in Iraq was gutted, in large part due to two American interventions, will be a source of lasting shame for Christianity in the United States, a blight on our collective conscience. This is quite apart from whatever conclusion you want to draw about the moral legitimacy of the two US-led interventions in Iraq, but the plain fact of the matter is, it was those two interventions in 1991 and 2003 that created a social context in which the Christians of Iraq are walking around with bullseyes on their back and paying the primary price for the chaos that has followed the fall of the old regime. The numbers are depressingly familiar. At the time, in 1991, at the time of the first US-led Gulf War, there were an estimated 1.2 to 1.5 million Christians in Iraq, one of the largest Christian communities in the Middle East, and of course a church that can trace its roots all the way back to the era of the apostles. As of today, the high-end estimate for the number of Christians left in Iraq is somewhere around 500, 600,000. In other words, it has been cut by half, and some believe the real number is lower still. In other words, a church that took 2,000 years to construct has been gutted in essentially the arc of 2 decades. And as an American Christian, I feel extraordinary personal responsibility for that. And the fact that the fate of our sisters and brothers in Iraq is not a front burner, get out of bed in the morning thinking about it, topic of conversation in American Christianity, to me is nothing short of a moral scandal. When I am on the lecture circuit talking about anti-Christian persecution in Catholic venues, one of the things I sometimes say to Catholic audiences in the United States is that if we had taken 1/10 the amount of time and treasure we took over the last 20 years debating whether we should say, "and also with you" versus "and with your spirit" at Mass, and had we invested that in gestures of solidarity for our suffering sisters and brothers in Iraq, we could have changed the world. And the fact that we have not done that is something that we are going to have to reckon with before the bar of history. Fortunately, tonight, this conference cannot be accused of inattention to the voices of Iraqi Christianity, because we have invited and we are privileged to hear from an eminent, if not the eminent, spokesperson for the church in Iraq. We are privileged to hear from His Beatitude Luis Sako, who is the Patriarch of the Chaldean Catholic Church, the Chaldean Catholic Patriarch of Babylon, and therefore the head of the Chaldean Catholic Church in Iraq. I was privileged to first meet His Beatitude at the Synod of Bishops on the Middle East, which I learned tonight was actually your idea, and a marvelous idea it was. And the document, the work produced by that Synod, is a permanent contribution, I think, to Catholic reflection on the issues facing the church in the Middle East. Tonight, His Beatitude is going to address us on the subject of what the Middle East would lose, what is at stake for the future of the Middle East in terms of the future of its Christian population. We are privileged and honored to have you with us, Your Beatitude, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank you for your concern and care about the Christians in the Middle East. We still hope that brotherhood and peace may be strengthened today in the different regions of the Middle East that are stricken by internal strifes and war. Indeed, we know that Christian life is founded on hope. Jesus' words, "Do not be afraid," and I am always repeating this to our people, encourage us to be and to remain a sign of hope for all people in those places where God has planted us. We remain one of the greatest challenges in the Middle East. We believe that, unfortunately, some powers are pushing for tensions. In Iraq, after 10 years, we don't have security yet. In this year, 6,200 persons have been killed until now. There are daily attacks, explosions, kidnappings, and murders. The same scenario is happening in Syria and in some way in Egypt. The Coptic Catholic Patriarch Abraham Sidrak recently stated that during the past 18 months, more than 100 Egyptian churches have been attacked. In Syria, until now, 67 churches have been attacked and more than 500,000 Christians left the country. Extremist political Islam is growing in the Middle East. The phenomenon remains a serious concern for us Christians. Who is behind them? Who is financing them and giving them arms? During 2013, the sectarian conflict between Iraqi Shiites and Sunnites has dramatically increased. There are two axes of support for this conflict. Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria are supporting the Shiites, the regimes. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey are supporting the Sunnites. But they are all Muslims. Thousands have been killed, and the unity of the country threatened. Muslims should work toward an agreement and a standing dialogue because intra-Muslim sectarian fighting is a big loss for all. People are dying and the infrastructure are being destroyed. The security system in many countries is ineffective and unprofessional. The government are generally incapable of controlling the situation. Following the USA-led invasion that toppled Saddam Hussein, turmoil swept Iraq, destroying it. A period of sectarian violence replaced his dictatorship. Suffering became an everyday struggle for all Iraqis, but especially for Christians. Muslims are always strong enough, thanks to their tribes. They also have the advantage of living in a country ruled by Islamic law. The religion of the state is Islam. But Christians and other minority groups have been worn down by a worsening security situation. Since 2003 up to date, more than 1,000 Christians have been killed. Others have been kidnapped and tortured. Some have been released only after a payment of a high ransom. 62 churches and monasteries have been attacked. In my city in Kirkuk, when I was Archbishop, my cathedral was attacked and 8 other churches. In Iraq, 1987, the community of Iraqi Christians included over 1,264,000. Today, less than half remain. Even more troubling is the numbers continue dropping. The United Nations Committee for Refugees recently declared that 850,000 Iraqi Christians have left the country since 2003. Naturally, we are worried about our future. The continuing awakening of Christianity in Iraq is not just a tragedy for our country, but for all the entire country and also in the area. Christianity has deep roots in the Middle East. Middle East Christianity has its origins in the earliest apostolic period of Christianity, and from its beginning, it has been expressed in the Syriac language and culture. Syriac, which is still widely spoken among Christians in Iraq today and also in Turkey, in Iran, is very close to the Aramaic of Jesus and the early Christian community. Syriac Christianity spread from this region across Asia to Tibet and China and represents one of the most significant expansions of the faith in history. The cultural, theological, and spiritual depth owed to these early Christian missionaries is immense. We should understand this as witness today the growth of Christianity in Asia. It was in Antioch, which was part of the Roman province of Syria, that the followers of Jesus Christ were first called Christians. Indeed, the patriarchacy of 5 churches originated in Antioch. I mean, Syrian Catholic, Syrian Orthodox, Maronite, Eastern Orthodox, and Melkite Catholics. Why Christians are attacked? Sectarian struggle, the conflict between political groups, has a negative impact on security. Often Christians are victims of tensions between political blocs. One goal is to force Christians, in effect, into territorial ghettos. I am very concerned, for example, about the political project of the creation of an independent zone in the plain of Nineveh in the north of Iraq. The Nineveh plain is largely surrounded by Arabs and Kurds, and Christians, of course, would serve as a useful and indefensible buffer zone between Arabs and Kurds. We will be just like a sandwich between them. In my opinion, it would be preferable to work at constitutional level to guarantee religious freedom and equal rights for believers of all faiths throughout the land, including Christians who until very recently lived throughout Iraq. The situation of Christians in Syria is similar now. Also, extremist Islam have the nostalgia for an Ummah nation united with the Caliphate. There are afraid that Muslims will lose their moral through modernism and globalization exported by the West. They normally think that Christianity has failed in the West, so they are afraid to lose also today their own identity. Therefore, they reject a secular state or a multicultural society and other Western values. They pursue the strategy to establish an Islamic state and also a confessional regime, I mean Shiite or Sunnite. While there seems to be a confessional conflict between Sunnites and Shiites, both agree on certain key goals. Both groups want to live under Islamic Sharia law, but want the effort of the West for democracy and creation of a modern regime to be unsuccessful. Armed assault, revenge killing, terror attacks, kidnapping hostages are employed to stop this project. Opposition to democracy is supported with armies and money from several countries because the project of a stable democracy in Iraq or in Syria disturbs their interest. The prospect also disturbs the neighbors, our neighbors. The Syrian conflict is a model of that problem. Therefore, the situation of religious freedom is worsening in both Iraq, Syria, and remains a serious cause of concern. Many individuals from various religious groups are targeted because of their religious identity or their secular leanings. Criminals and organized crime. Criminals look for money. Christians are an easy target, so they have no militias or tribes to defend them or protect them. Because the government is unable to control the whole country, so Christians have therefore suffered a lot. The position of the West. The West does not understand the difficulties and fears that Christians are currently experiencing in various countries of the Middle East. Religious radicalism is growing and becoming very aggressive. Religious violence is on the increase across the Middle East. It is becoming a culture. Breaking up communities and destroying relations between people from different religious traditions. This violence is damaging the very fabric of Middle Eastern societies. Islamist extremists want to take advantage of the current situation in order to empty the Christians' presence in the Middle East, as if it were an obstacle for their plans. There are countries that do not want the so-called Arab Spring democracy. Freedom is dangerous to them. The West has to open its eyes to see both the fears and the hopes that animate the Christians and minorities in Iraq, Syria, and Egypt. Most Christians ask, what is the guarantee that we will be able to stay alive, not to be killed or expelled from our country sooner or later? How can we achieve safety and a brighter future? These are the challenges and the crucial questions of Christians. Unfortunately, some countries of the West are encouraging also the immigration of Christians. Each month, several families, and now each day, 10 persons are living, Christians are living. and many of them are in good economic situation. Many young Christians, especially those who are well educated, are leaving Iraq. This is an immense loss for those who stay. It is an immense loss for Iraqi culture and politics. So we are hoping for more positive steps from the West that will change the situation for better and increase the well-being of the Iraqi people and the Iraqi nation. We earnestly hope that it is still possible to achieve a harmonious way of living together, perhaps to establish a criterion of citizenship that enables us all to be integrated regardless of religion or ethnicity, based on the idea that of all people are created equal. We need a way to help Muslims reconcile Islam with citizenship based on full equality, a secular state that entails cooperation between religious and political leaders will be an ideal. The West must help our countries to respect human rights, and in particular religious freedom, as they are respected in the West. It is worthwhile noting that today many millions of Syriac Christians, I mean Malabaris and Malankaris, have lived in India from the early Christian centuries. These Syriac Christians, linked to Iraqi Christians by faith and ecclesial communion and liturgical tradition, contribute greatly to India, a vast and populous country with many religions, a democratic system, and secular constitution. Their religious freedom helps sustain relations between majority Hindus and Muslims and Christians minorities. In Iraq, it is vital that the government, police, army, courts, and all institutions uphold the law and maintain order among all citizens. The education system should stress national unity, eliminating from school programs, books, and religious institutions expressions that favor hatred and violence, or the marginalization of one religious group as opposed to others. We still hope that the situation will change and security will come back. The historical contribution of Christians in the Muslim culture. The current situation is all the more tragic because Christianity has its roots in the Middle East, in Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Egypt. Christians were a majority in the region well before the arrival of Islam. They were well organized. At the time of the Arab conquest in Dar al-Islam, that means the land of Islam, the people of the book, Jews and Christians, were tolerated and treated as religious minorities under the protection of Islam. They were recognized as believers in God despite their refusal to accept the Prophet Muhammad. Adult males were thus not required to convert, although that option was always open to them, but had to pay a poll tax, jizya, as the price for this protection. Moreover, certain conditions, like the obligation to wear distinctive dress, were eventually imposed on Christians. In Islamic 2nd century, the laws became more stringent. The early Umayyad period was marked by an open and tolerant attitude toward Christians, One of the main reasons might have been that the Muslims needed the Christian administrative and economic knowledge as well as an experience to rule and organize the newly conquered territories. For example, St. John of Damascus was one of the earliest and most influential Christian theologians of Islam. He and his father are believed to have served as administrators in the Umayyad Caliphate. John, a saint of the Catholic Church, was educated in arithmetic, geometry, theology, music, and astronomy. In 1883, he was declared as a doctor of the Catholic Church by the Pope Leo XIII. In the attitude of Muslims toward Christians, however, very soon one can sense a certain ambivalence for social and political reasons. At times that Muslims were more open and tolerant, at times more aggressive and even oppressive. This ambivalence is easily justified by different Quranic verses. The Abbasid period inaugurated a time of wide and fertile cultural exchange as a consequence of the spread of Arabic language. Commissioned by the caliphs, Bayt al-Hikmah, the house of wisdom, Christians, primarily from the Syriac tradition, undertook huge systematic translations, especially in the fields of science, philosophy, and medicine from Greek via Syriac Arabic into Arabic. In this way, knowledge of the Greco-Roman world was made available as one of the foundation for the development of the Arab Islamic culture. The transmission of the great classic to Islamic civilization expanded the intellectual possibilities of the Muslim world. In addition, it contributed significantly to the knowledge, to the flowering of Western political and religious thoughts. Christians in the Middle East continue to seek this role in acting as a bridge in the vital and necessary dialogue between the West and Islam today. Not only clerics produce literature, but also educated laypersons and physicians. Among them were the famous Bukhti, a Christian physician at the School of Medicine in Gundishabur, who served the caliphs. These authors were also theologians. The Arabs use the term ilm al-kalam, which means the science of speaking about God, theology. That is the translation of theology. There are also texts written in Syriac, which were mainly intended for Christians to use within their own communities, encouraging them in their faith and helping them to respond to certain questions and objections raised by Muslims. Those written in Arabic presented Christian dogmas and morals to Muslims. Some of them are of an apologetic nature, and others are clearly polemical. Today, many Muslims do not know the history of Christians in the religious and intellectual formation of Islamic civilization. It is vital that this positive moment in Christian-Muslim relations become better known and its significance to Islam better understand. In the 12th and 13th century, after having contributed to the development of the Arab and Persian culture, Christians and Muslims lived in a common cultural world in which they shared both values and achievements. During the Ottoman period, the focus of discussion was on the application of the millet system. Millet indicates the group is no Muslims, because in Islam they call it al-Ummah nation, but the others I called millets. It left lasting marks on the minds of the people and even on institutions. Many problems which Christians face today in the Islamic world cannot be understood if one does not take into account the experience of this millet system, which has survived in one or other way in modern situation with Muslim majority. Its real impact remains ambiguous and needs further research. For the important issue of the relations between Christians and Muslims in our times, it is worthwhile to take into account the experience of the past and the present Syrian communities in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and India, who developed a form of encounter with their Muslim neighbors in the field of dialogue. Christians witness coexistence and cooperation. It is hoped that this long tradition may help the Syrian Christians to preserve their rich heritage and continue to offer their unique contributions to their respective cultures. We must not forget the Syrian Christians is the fourth cultural pillar of the early Christian traditions, along with Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. As such, the continued repression of the Syriac tradition would be deeply detrimental to Christians as a global religion. But Syriac Christianity is also vital to the health of the Muslim majority nations of the Middle East. It, along with all other Christian cultures of the contemporary Middle East, lend to the region its plurality and diversity. The loss of Christianity from the Middle East would fundamentally alter the contours of culture and society in nations such as Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Lebanon. It would deal a severe blow to any hope of pluralism and democracy. Remember that when the Jews left much of the Middle East region in the decades after the Second World War, the relationship between Jews and Muslims was fundamentally altered. This is also true for Christian relations with Islam. A Christian exodus from the Middle East, such as this, would have an impact of historic proportions of Muslim-Christian relations. In sum, Christians are an integral part of the national Arab tissue. They have contributed to the achievement of the Arab Islamic civilization alongside their fellow Muslims. It is the interests of the region, the West, and the entire international community that they remain in the Middle East as citizens enjoying full equality under the law, and therefore in a position to continue as major contributors to their respective cultures. How can Christians and Muslims live together peacefully? The role of religious communities. Religious authorities in the Middle East have a unique, irreplaceable role in unifying people. There is a vital need for religious groups to work together in promoting culture of dialogue and peace in tangible ways, and a culture of recognition of the other who is different, because God created us different. This is in Quran. God created us different. We must attain a broad acceptance and respect for human dignity, as well as the values of citizenship and coexistence. The religious discourse must defend the rights of all people and the sanctity of all life. It is simply unacceptable that an Iraqi imam 3 weeks ago called on his fellow Muslims not to greet Christians and no Muslims. Such a culture cannot stand. The Iraqi government, in all its departments and sections, needs to be united and to collaborate in positive ways to provide security and protection of religious freedom and ethnic diversity, as well as to promote reconciliation and social cohesion between all the Iraqi people. The culture of peace must be a culture of mutual care. All citizens should exchange ideas and proposals about concrete actions to strengthen dialogue, build trust, spread a culture of peace, and to promote the values of human dignity, human rights, citizenship, conviviality, and the values of religious freedom and democracy. Christian role. For their part, Christians in the Middle East should try to hold fast to their ancient homelands, maintain their historic presence, not to flee to the West. They have to be brave enough to continue their witness in their particular countries. At the same time, they must permit their difficulties and suffering to be a real sign of hope and peace for their fellow citizens. All nations should encourage Middle East Christians to continue to be involved and active in the culture, social work, and policy of their respective countries, and not be afraid to claim their civil rights and equality of citizenship. This important goal was emphasized by Pope Francis in receiving the Oriental Patriarchs at the Vatican on November 21st. He said, the Roman Catholic Church would not accept a Middle East without Christians, who often find themselves forced to flee areas of conflict and unrest in the region. So I repeat, as I repeat many times, the time has come to move from tolerance to religious freedom and full citizenship. In this respect, let me quote Pope Emeritus Benedict from his apostolic exhortation, Ecclesia in Medio Oriente. Religious tolerance exists in a number of countries, but it does not have much effect since it remains limited in its field of action. This is a need to move beyond tolerance to religious freedom. Taking this step does not open the doors to relativism, as some would maintain. It does not compromise belief, but rather calls for a reconsideration of the relationship between man, religion, and God. It is not an attack on the fundamental truth of belief, since despite human and religious divergence, a ray of truth shines on all men and women. We know very well that truth, apart from God, does not exist as an autonomous reality. If it did, it would be an idol, The truth cannot unfold except in a otherness open to God, who wishes to reveal his own otherness in and through my human brothers and sisters. That was a quotation. As for us, we Christians have to find answers to the question of Muslims, as our fathers did during the Umayyad and Abbasid period. Such undertaking can help the Church to look for a new methodology and a new and more comprehensible theological language in Arabic to help Christians and Muslims to understand our faith and the importance of religious freedom to every person and every society. What we have a system, a philosophical, logical system now about our dogma, our teaching, and people cannot understand. So, as our fathers did, we have to look for a new theological language for us in Arabic, but maybe for the others in other contexts. I suggest that the Church produce a new document addressed only to Muslims. It is important to clarify with them both our fears and our hopes. Among other things, this document should explain in language compatible with Islam the magnificent doctrine of religious freedom as it is articulated in Dignitatis Humanae, the Declaration of Religious Freedom from the Second Vatican Council. It is, of course, also critical that the moderate voices of Islam raise right away to say no to violence against Christians. The time has come to moderate Muslims, who constitute the majority of Muslims, to start promoting civil harmony and religious freedom in the societies. They must prove to the world through deeds that Islam is not a religion of terror and killing of innocent civilians. The majority of Muslim population is good and not violent. There are very, very good Muslims. They do not agree with the extremists, but they are also afraid to react publicly. In short, I invite our Muslim friends in the Middle East to bring a common action to a common word. This is also a little bit Quranic. Conclusion: what Middle Eastern societies will lose if Christians flee? The immigration of Christians is a loss with great historical significance for Muslims. If Christians flee the Middle East, Muslims will be just like Taliban. Be sure. They take with them their open-mindedness, their culture, their qualifications, and their commitment to religious freedom. It is important for both Christians and Muslims to work together to determine the future shape for their societies and countries in the midst of the seismic political changes rocking the region. They have to build, little by little, a new model of society in the Middle East. The changes are very dramatic and occurring very fast. Muslims and Christians must face them together with courage and hope. Christians are important to the Middle East because of their culture, high levels of education, skills, qualification opens the spirit of cooperation, and their institutions like schools, hospitals, orphanage homes for the aged people and poor, as well as their economic enterprise and small businesses. Many Muslims do appreciate their presence and contribution. Many understand that Christians are a guarantee for a better future for Muslims. Attempts to repress Christians or to cause them to flee their respective homelands in the Middle East, where they have lived for centuries, is a great crime against them, a blow to national unity, and a big loss for Muslims. A Middle East without Christians loses its beautiful multi-identity. We Christians are trying to remain in our homelands because we are committed to love each other. But Christians are also educated to live in freedom and peace and security. From where there is no freedom and peace, they live in search of a shelter to educate their children and also to live their faith freely. Those remaining, of course, feel much more vulnerable now, and if we are isolated, we are incapable of doing anything. But when we are united all together, then we will be a stronger church and we will have an impact. Middle Eastern Christianity, Middle Eastern Christians have long lived with different kinds of oppression. Establishing freedom and democracy takes time and education. We cannot impose democracy magically and also with weapons. Democracy and freedom are projects people need to be educated with, formed. A separation between government and religion is especially important. Democracy cannot function if Islam is not updated. They have to make a new reading of their religion. We must work together for a civilian state in which the only criterion is citizenship grounded in full equality under the law. Muslim religious leaders should get involved in dialogue to build a multicultural and multi-religious society and reduce interreligious tensions and conflicts so as to build true coexistence. Sectarian and provocative speeches do not help humanity's development and are contrary to the universal religious Christmas message of peace on earth. Because we are all created by God, each of us carries a heritage that profoundly links us all. Middle Eastern countries need a cultural and social model that promotes unity through pluralism, religious freedom, harmonious coexistence among various religious and ethnic groups. Closure is a sign of death. People who is close-minded, that means he is dying. Openness is a sign of growth and integration. Religions must act in a positive manner. They must orientate people to end the climate of hatred. In conclusion, and I am finishing, let me make a few recommendations. The West and the international community should increase their effort to assist the Muslim nations of the Middle East in modernizing Islam's approach to religious freedom. As part of these efforts, the West and the international community should work to convince Muslim nations that their repression and persecution of the minority Christians communities is not only harming the Christians, but it is harming the societies themselves. All should work to stop the mortal exodus that afflicts the Christian community and the entire Middle East. Thank you for your patience.
Your Beatitude, thank you for those extraordinary reflections. In fact, it was so good, I need to warn you of something, which is you call on this document or in your speech, for the church to produce a document on Islam. I am seriously tempted to go home and write a column proposing that you should be named the chair of the editorial committee for this document. So if you don't want the job, you should tell me, and maybe you can, buy my silence. His Beatitude has graciously agreed to extend the conversation by entertaining some questions. So if you could just raise your hand and identify yourself and state your question. Yes, Father.
My name is Lawrence. I'm from Nigeria. From the presentation that His Beatitude just gave, the situation in Iraq and in the Middle East is really a pathetic one. But also, from his presentation and then also to you, John Allen, from the point of view of the media, now, the problem, we all know what the issues are, we know what the issues are, but then sometimes I'd like to say that the media reading, if you like, of the situation, it's good to have materials that emanate from these situations, even though in most cases they are lopsided, especially from the mainstream media. But then the media reading of these events most times pit the situation against the minority in the Middle East. On that note, what can be done? Because in this case, it's as if the situation seems irredeemable, but then how can the media, who actually from their reading, not necessarily the report, but the reading of the situation have created more problems, how can they be brought to account for these things from the result of their reading of the situation in the Middle East? Thank you.
So thank you, Father. I think now, now it is Islam, but before also Christianity. Now Islam is politicized. It is not religion. Everything, even the explosions and the persecutions are politicized. There are plans and maybe people, nations behind the tensions, creative tensions between Muslims, but also Muslims and the others. Of course, Muslims, simple people think, because the imams are educating them, that Islam is the completion of religion. Islam, the religion of God. The others are infidels. So the speech is also increasing this, this kind of fundamentalism. I think the West is also a factor. They can help a lot for a good understanding between religions. The reason behind the fundamentalism are, first, they think they will lose their religion identity because the morality of the West, and also they think Christianity has failed, and so it is coming, they will lose. There is no moral now. They think so. And about also the family, the culture of pleasure, and so everything is doing them, so we have to be aware and to keep ourselves. The policy, the West is exploiting the oil, making progress, and they are going back to the desert. The problem of Palestine, and so therefore I think Palestine, therefore they should understand that for us Christians in the Middle East, we should not be assimilated with the, status which are secular. There are no more. There is no more religion. There is no more official religion of the state in the West. But there, it is still Islam is the religion of the state. I think Christian, in their own concrete, in the spot, should work a lot to help Muslims to understand their presence and also their culture and their faith. And the others should help them.
I'm sorry, Your Beatitude, just to ask, because I made a point about the media reading of the situation and the resultant effects. Now, probably John Allen might help us. Can Professor Bragg, how can the media be called to account for their reading of the situation that, if you like, accentuates the violence, the intolerance, and the continuous problem of the war that seems not to have an end? Thank you.
Do you have any thoughts on that? How can we in the media be held accountable?
Well, now the media are taking only the bad news. The good news, they are not speaking about it. And they are many times complicating the situation. And for instance, the life in Iraq is normal. We are there, we move, we go, and there are explosions here and there. But it is not, Iraq is not, the whole country is in conflict now. Maybe if they can also help people to understand and to spread a culture of respect, of peace, of dialogue. And I think the media has a message, and they have a mission and a message. They should, a positive message they have to spread it.
Thank you. Is there a question? Yes, Bam. Yes, go ahead. Yes, you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, but you called on the West to help the Muslims modernize. Is there something that the Eastern Christians have to do in order to accommodate what is happening in the Muslim community? Because you presented their fears and their understanding of a reality that they live in. Is there something that the Eastern Christians have to do? Or is it all the burden on the Muslims? I'm putting you on the spot, I'm sorry.
I think Christians in the West can do a lot to show solidarity and to help Christians in the Middle East. What we feel that we are forgotten and isolated. Sometimes we are thinking that if they kill us all, what will be the reaction of Christians and in the West? Maybe just a condemnation or something like that. But in fact, what action can be taken? I think, through the governments and also international agencies, they have, the West, Christians and the others, can do a lot to help people in those countries to respect human rights.
What I'm asking is what do Arab Christians have to do? Do they have to change, or do they continue to look to the West for salvation?
I know the salvation should come from our lands and not from our side. Then we will have more problems with if you are coming or the West is doing something to protect the Christians. I am not calling to protect Christians, but to spread and to help for this multicultural and a harmonic society for all human beings, not only Christians, but also Muslims deserve that, to live in a good way, with dignity. Really not, that will be a big mistake.
Yes.
Buonasera, good evening.
Lui,
This is Ms. Valgiusti. I'm working with the WTN and an Italian association called the Save the Monasteries. I would like to say something to the lady who just talked, the lady who is here, who has just been speaking. The Eastern Christians are doing already a lot. I mean, they're doing their best. So this is the point. And the
Could you pull the
question
microphone
is,
a little closer to you? We're having trouble hearing you.
The question is, when you talk about the Westerns, the Catholics Western, helping the Eastern Christians, does it make sense to talk about specific projects like work, about heritage, for example, work to collaboration for the Christian heritage in Middle East, other kind of Western help on a practical way, because the problem is how Christians can stay in the Middle East, how they can keep their heritage, they can make it be a value, their presence be a value, their tradition be something that is not just accidental as it is 2,000 years old. Does it make sense what I'm saying about projects, about practical things, and not just talking a lot about things that don't happen?
Do you understand the question?
no, really, I don't.
So the question is, are there practical projects that the West could help promote that would help Arab Christians?
We don't need material projects, Elizabeth. What we need is, to help people, to educate people for human rights, for the promotion of women, and maybe to create schools and centers, workshops, to help people to live together and to eliminate this culture of violence, of this, of fighting or taking revenge. And this is very, very strong now. I think the main thing we need is that, a new culture, and not to live in the past. Today we need a new culture, a new education, and new programs of even of religious instruction or national.
Yes, in the back.
Thank you very much, Your Beatitude. I'm very encouraged by your message that in Iraq, life is possible also for Christians. And I also admire your courage to call on Christians to remain in their homelands despite persecution. My question is about the success of the document which you propose. I don't know whether it will be welcomed and accepted by the Muslim community, considering what happened when the Pope Emeritus made a quotation, and then fundamentalist groups went on the streets and made a lot of chaos. Will the document be at least welcomed by the moderate Muslims there? Thank you.
I think there is the dialogue is possible. between Christians and Muslims, even with fundamentalists. It is a way to dialogue and to speak with them. When we meet, you know, we are trying to know each other very close and not to live, you know, with ideas, fixed ideas and popular ideas, so on and so on. Even we can speak about our dogmas. We explain to them. And many times they are understanding, because sometimes, you know, they hear our prayers or our speeches, homilies. Jesus is the Son of God. They think Son of God, that means something sexual, you know. And they think that Mary was the wife of God, Sahiba, even that. But when we are speaking, this is not, you know, physical, that's spiritual in another way. They understand. They understand. But, and our fathers, you know, in the past did a good job. Even there were, you know, dialogue between a patriarch and also a caliph about religion, about moral, about also worship. Today, I think we are called to do something like that, but in a new language.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Beatitude. My name is Elizabeth Prodromou. I'm a Greek Orthodox Christian. I live in the United States. I have a Greek Cypriot father, and my patriarch is Bartholomew, the ecumenical patriarch in Constantinople. So the pain that you're describing and the tragic urgency that you're describing with Syria and Iraq is one with which I am very personally familiar. No one in the West has watched as over the 90 years the Turkish Republic has eradicated systematically Greek Orthodox Christians from Turkey. There are only 1,750 left today. And the West, Christians and non-Christians alike, looked away, didn't tell the stories. For 37 years, the Turkish military has occupied northern Cyprus. And if you've been to the occupied north, you'll see what the future looks like. It looks like a place where all churches are desecrated and turned to stables and military pillboxes, where cemeteries are disinterred, and where there are only 380 old women left there in the north waiting to die because they won't leave their place. So your message resonates. I served 8 years on the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, and this leads to my question. One of the things I saw from the Commission, and we traveled much in the region, and one of the things I've learned from my own history is that not speaking about these things in the diplomatic space is especially problematic. And you mentioned Nineveh Plain. One of the problems with the Nineveh Plain issue was Iraqi Christians fearing that they would be put in a fishbowl. They would be even greater target. A broader problem with Nineveh Plain, and the Commission confronted this in its efforts to try to help Iraqi Christians, was how to find an alternative. The question is this: in January, there will be the conference in Geneva to deal with Syria. And I don't have a lot of hope, but I do have hope in my heart. The question is whether or not all the Christians, of the Eastern Christians of the region, are speaking to one another about what they would like presented or what they would like to present at that conference in Geneva, so that decisions are not made on their behalf, so that Orthodox Christians, Roman Catholic Christians, Melkite Christians, Syriac Christians, every Christian has a voice at that conference, because that was missing in Iraq, it's been missing in Syria, and it's been missing in Turkey and Turkish-occupied Cyprus, so the voice is nearly snuffed out. Thank you.
Yeah, really, I agree with you. I know the situation in Turkey, and we are afraid the situation in Syria, in Iraq, in Syria, and in Egypt will be similar. Therefore, we need a help, you know. And unfortunately, that the West is looking only for interest, political and economic interest, the oil now. Last century, in the beginning, for instance, France and others, when they came into the Middle East, they opened the schools and many, many good things. Today, they are only creating problems, selling weapons, and taking the oil. They are not taking care of of human beings. I am not speaking only about Christians. There are also Muslims. Many Muslims are killed, both. So I think this is a sin.
Yes, Paul.
Paul Marshall, the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute in Washington. Your Beatitude, thank you very much for your remarks. Two questions, if I may. One is, you mentioned a document in terms of updating an Islamic view of religious freedom. Would it be helpful to have such a document or documents written by Muslims, which could be shared? There are enough people who could write that. That's one. The second is, I would just invite you to say more on something you talked about. Most of my work is oriented towards governments, trying to get them involved in these issues. And usually a question of religious freedom or human suffering is not enough to get a reaction from most governments, unless they can tie it into something else which they are interested in. And you touched on the fact that the removal of Christians and other minorities from the Middle East would have major consequences. That the Muslims would become left alone with no other to talk to, would become like the Taliban. One would lose openness and talent and so forth. Could I just invite you to expand more on this theme, because I think it's one which may have some resonance in dealing with Western governments.
Muslims are majority there, and they don't have this initiative. Therefore, we are suffering. I think we should have this initiative to prepare a good document to explain who we are, what we believe to them in Arabic language, an official document, and also our attitude toward Islam. How can we acknowledge Islam or recognize Islam as a religion or as what? Yeah. This is very helpful. The policy is, very different, and the speech is different from the concrete situation. When Americans came, everybody in Iraq was happy, so we will have freedom, democracy, and so. But after 2 months, confusion, and was chaotic. I think democracy and freedom are projects. They should educate people, form people. Even the team of the, ruling the country, until now, our government is not formed, and the government is divided. How can they work? How they can control the situation, and militias and so. So where is democracy? And now we don't understand the reason why they are changing regimes. They are telling they are a dictator, but the new regimes are worse. We are not understanding. It is true that the dictatorship is bad, but we need also security. Freedom without security is no sense. We cannot live without security. So the governments, if they want to change you know, the situations in those countries. They should educate people, help people with programs and with medias, with schools, even educate clerics.
We are scheduled to wrap up at 7:30, so why don't we do this? We will take 2 or 3 more questions in a row and then give you an opportunity to give a kind of synthetic answer at the end. Okay? So you, sir, there, you, and you in the back. Okay, so we'll start with you.
Thank you so very much. My name is Francesco Petrucciano, and I would like to speak in Italian if it's possible.
Prego.
Prima di tutto volevo ringraziarla per le bellissime parole e anche per il fatto che lei si sia diciamo, diretto ai musulmani, anche con parole molto diciamo, benevole. Lei li ha definiti, ed è sicuramente così, come persone assolutamente non violente e normali come noi. Questo dà molto decoro e diciamo, molta dignità alle sue parole e alla sua funzione di magistero lì, quindi grazie di questo. E dopo tutto vorrei fare un'osservazione che forse però diciamo, suonerà un po' più dura. Lei conosce benissimo il concetto di dhimmi nel diritto islamico. Sostanzialmente il diritto islamico asserisce che un soggetto appartenente ad un'altra religione monoteista può vivere nello Stato retto da un orientamento islamico, ma con delle limitazioni. Queste vengono molto spesso definite delle protezioni, ed è vero, ma in quale significato? Molto spesso un conflitto religioso in linea generale viene definito come un conflitto politico degenerato. In questo caso io mi chiedo quanto nell'Islam questo conflitto sia, mi dispiace molto fare questa domanda, ma quanto forse questo conflitto sia più presente, e se lei diciamo, crede che questo esito della comunità cristiana in Oriente di essere definito come dhimmi possa essere un rischio diciamo, reale, concreto.
Grazie. Okay.
Thank you, Your Beatitude, for your presence here. I very much appreciate it. I have spent much of the last 3 to 4 years doing research among Christians who come from a Muslim background in the Middle East. And I would like to know, what is your message, if you have one, to people who are born into Muslim families, who have heard the Christian message, and they desire catechism, they desire baptism, and they desire to become Catholic Christians?
Okay. And in the back.
Grazie per la sua presenza, sono un cappuccino e parlo italiano, scusate.
Non si sente bene. Voce.
Sono un cappuccino, mi chiamo Claudio e grazie per la sua presenza. Perché il silenzio nei confronti di regimi dittatoriali? È vero. Perché...
Non si sente ancora.
Si sente adesso?
Perfetto, okay. Ottimo.
Allora, faccio questa domanda veloce: come arrivare a una riformulazione dei diritti umani accettati anche dall'Islam, in modo da avere strumenti giuridici internazionali che garantiscono la cittadinanza ai cristiani, ma a tutti coloro che nascono in Iraq, in Turchia, in Arabia Saudita e in molti altri paesi? Forse è un lavoro diplomatico lento, ma deve essere fatto perché il problema è lì.
Okay. Grazie. So there are really sort of 2 points here. Yeah. First question about the institution of dhimmitud, and I think we can connect that to the third question about how do you create juridical instruments in Muslim societies that protect human rights when you have this cultural legacy of second-class citizenship for non-Muslims. How do you put those 2 things together? The other question is people who are born into Muslim families who are intrigued by the Christian message and who would like possibly to convert to Christianity or at least explore conversion. What is your message to them?
Okay. To answer to the first question, I think we have also to form Christians. We need to be formed. Why we are afraid to claim our rights? And I think personally, we can do a lot with Muslims, with the leaders, when we are very strong and say that I am Iraqi and I am a citizen and I have the same rights. Why I am considered a second hand or a category of citizenship. And this is really not legal. And many times they are understanding, and we can work, we and with the others, we can work to make modification and the constitutions to separate religion from the state and to create let us say a positive secular regime. There's positive and negative here. There are some states clearly against religion, but we can respect religions, all religions, but also have a good, civil society. The second question, the law in Islamic law, it is not allowed to be converted to a Muslim to be converted to another religion, but the others are free to be converted, and they are very welcome. Personally, as a bishop or a priest, I have no right to refuse anyone who wants to be Christians. Amen. Really, I cannot, but I have to examine the situation to know if he is really sincere and he wants or not. Yeah. Then, the situation is dangerous. We have to find a way to help those people to live their faith. You cannot think, or compare the situation in the Middle East like here. There is no freedom. But we have to find a way to help people to live their own faith, to change their faith. And we also here, with this, we can work with the Constitution. Why a Muslim can, a Christian can be Muslim and a Muslim cannot be a Christian? And why a Muslim can be married with a Christian lady or girl and a Christian man or a gentleman cannot be married with a Muslim? I said that in the parliament, but we need time to prepare the ground. It is not easy. For centuries, the situation is so.
Thank you. We easily could go on talking with you all night and well into tomorrow because this has been, but you're tired. We're excited, you're tired.
Thank you.
May I ask you may I ask two favors of you on behalf of everyone in this room? First, will you please carry a message to your people from us when you go home to Iraq? Yeah. It's a very simple message. And the message is, we have not and we will not forget about you.
Thank you so much.